Hello. Hi there. I am here today to talk to you about all of the books that I read in February. Today we have 17 books to talk about, and so I thought that I would just get right into it and start talking to you about the books that I read in February. Unfortunately, the first book that I read was actually a book by my favorite author, and I gave it 5 stars, but I can't talk about it with you today because it is part of the St. Martin's Press boycott that's happening right now. It is, I believe, published by Wednesday's Books, and so can't talk about it. If you want to know more, I will link Readers for Accountability down in the description, and you should definitely look them up if you want to know more about the boycott. The second book that I read this month was Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. It is Ali Hazelwood's YA debut, and it is about Mallory, who used to play chess but doesn't anymore, and you don't know why, but you know that she works really hard for her family, her mother and her 2 sisters, and her mom is sick and her sisters are ungrateful little brats, and she busts her butt every day to provide for them. But her friend invites her to a chess tournament for charity, and she goes, and that gets her started back on the path of playing chess. And there's romance involved, and it's really cute. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if I already said, but I gave it 4 stars. I feel like it was just a cute, pretty light, there were some heavy bits, but for the most part it was pretty light book about a young girl who was kind of figuring it out, figuring out that life thing, and a boy who was kind of doing the same, and they fall in love, and it's really cute. Next book that I read was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager, and I truly, honestly, don't really remember what happens in this book at all. I think that she's an apartment sitter, kind of, who's getting paid to stay in this really wealthy apartment, and it's just, I truly don't really remember. I gave it 2 stars, and I think that, honestly, this concludes my attempts to read Riley Sager. I think we're just done. He and I, we are not compatible. So, yeah. That's that. Then I read Children of Blood and Bone by Toni, Adeyemi, and I have to say that book I still think about. I finished it February 8th, and I still think about that book probably every single day. Today is March 5th, so but almost a month. And I cried a lot in that book, and I read the second book right after. Spoiler alert. I also read Children of Virtue and Vengeance, but I gave them both 5 stars. They are about an African-based world, fantasy world, where there was magic, but an evil ruler took out an entire population of people, like ethnic cleansing, and now there's not. And our main character is a child of one of the magi who was wiped out, and she helps to bring magic back, is really what they're doing. And the story is so heavy in a lot of places. It is not a light, happy story, like at all. I cried a lot, but it was so impactful. There's a tiny bit of romance in it, but it's really not the point of the story. And there's just like love and betrayal and family and finding your purpose, and it's just really good. It's good. It's messy. It's messy, but it's good. I really enjoyed them. Highly, highly, highly recommend them. I don't know if I'm doing a good enough job selling them, but please read those books. They're so good. Then after I read those 2 books, I really needed a palate cleanser, so I read Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, and I knew that I had had this on my TBR for quite a while. I knew that I wanted to read it, but I don't know what stopped me from reading it before. But I finally borrowed it from my library, and I devoured it. I mean, it's a graphic novel, and it's pretty short. It's not very long at all, but I absolutely devoured it. I loved it so much, and I've been just kind of using Heartstopper books as palate cleanser, so I actually read another one this month too. But they're just like a nice palate cleanser. I gave it 5 stars. Highly, highly, highly recommend that one as well. It was so cute. It was so cute. It's the perfect little palate cleanser after you read like a heavy book. Then, at the recommendation of one of my high school friends and followers on TikTok, I actually read 5 Total Strangers by Natalie D. Richards, and I gave it 3 stars. It is about this high schooler who is supposed to be traveling home for Christmas, but her flight gets delayed because of a storm, and she ends up with 4 other college-age people to try to drive, and it's a thriller. So obviously things happen along the way, and I honestly didn't hate it, but it wasn't that fun. Like it was okay, which is why I gave it 3 stars. 3 stars is a pretty good middle ground for me, where like It was okay. It wasn't bad, it wasn't good. It was okay. After that, I read The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. And just assume when I say I read, I listened to an audiobook. I go through phases where I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I'm really in one of those phases right now. But if you don't know, The Atlas 6 is a fantasy book. It's a fantasy series that is set in modern, like a modern world. I actually don't really know the timeline that it's set in. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't actually know, like, what time it's set in. I just know that it's set in, like, a real world setting where magic exists, and there are a bunch of different types of magic. And Atlas Blakely, I think his name's Atlas Blakely. It threw me off because Olivia Blake is the author, so that threw me. But yeah, I think his name's Atlas Blakely. He works for this organization, this, like, fraternity sort of thing, where they, like, have access to all of this knowledge, and every year they initiate into their ranks 2 people, I think. Not every year. I'm doing such a bad job explaining this. He essentially gets together this group of exceptionally talented people that are, like, the best of their magic, and is getting them to compete for these spots that they have in the organization. And what they get is knowledge and influence that will propel them into the careers that they want, into the future that they want. And it is multiple POV. It is multiple third-person POV, if I remember correctly. And some characters I loved. Some characters I could not stand. If I'm being honest, most characters I could not stand, but in, like, a good way. It was a good thing. I gave it 4 stars. I'm very excited to read the next one. I have a hold placed on it at my library, but I'm, like, 8th in line, so it's going to be a while. But yeah, that was The Atlas 6. I am probably the last one to read this book, so you've probably already read it. But in case you haven't, I recommend it. It was really good. It was very dark academia, like Harry Potter for grown-ups. Not that Harry Potter's not for grown-ups, but you know what I mean. Like, Harry Potter was originally a children's book about children, but it's more like dark academia Harry Potter setting. And instead of a school, it's like a educational fraternity. Next, I read Queen Bee by Amalie Howard. My friend over on TikTok, Claire, had read it, and she kind of liked it, and it seemed really interesting to me, so I decided to read it too, and I honestly hated it. There was a lot wrong with it. Mostly, the idea of the book is there is this girl who was kind of ruined by this awful, evil girl spreading rumors about her, and she ended up running away. And she comes back a few years later looking different, and essentially nobody recognizes her somehow. And she seeks her revenge on her friend and the boy that she liked, who, like, betrayed her. And it's supposed to be, like, anti-Regency, where, like, it's set in the Regency era, but, like, some of the customs of the Regency times are ignored, and then some of them aren't, and there's, like, diversity and just some things that are different. I don't know, it's just, I like anti-Regency. Like, for instance, Reign. I don't think Reign was really the Regency era, but you know what I mean, like, in the TV show Reign, they wore dresses that were, like, obviously not historically accurate and stuff, and, like, hairstyles, and, like, said and did some things that were not historically accurate, but were entertaining. And I'm all for that. I'm good with that. I'm happy with it most of the time. But it didn't work in this book. This book wasn't believable at all, and it just wasn't that good. Like, the writing was really juvenile, and I really struggled through it. I just wasn't a fan. So, 2 stars. After that, I read The Last Mrs. Parrish by Constantine, and this one was pretty good. It is about this woman, it's a younger woman, who is definitely a gold digger, like that. She's a self-proclaimed gold digger. She knows who she is. And she set her sights on this, like, millionaire, who is married. And her whole thing is she wants to infiltrate his little circle, become best friends with his wife, and essentially steal him. And so the first half of the book is her doing that, and then the second half of the book is everything from the wife's perspective. So, like, you get from the beginning of the book until the middle of the book where, like, things are about to go down, and then right at the middle of the book you switch back to the wife's perspective, which actually starts back when she, like, married her husband, and you get her perspective. And it was seriously so good. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. I Truly loved it. I recommended it to like 5 people. It is so good. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. After that, I read Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, and I'm looking up the description right now because I've just done a terrible job every single time I've tried to explain this book to anyone. From the New York Times bestselling author of An Enchantment of Ravens comes an enthralling adventure about an apprentice at a magical library who must battle a powerful sorcerer to save her kingdom. And that is very accurate. This main character, whose name is Elizabeth, works in a library. She's learning to be a warden, who are like the protectors of the library. And at that library are a bunch of grimoires, which obviously hold magical spells. And the grimoires are alive. Like, they're books that are living. And depending on how much power they are, like what grade they are, they can communicate more. Some can actively talk to you. Some are so powerful that they can literally like grow legs and walk out, so they're like under lock and key. But in the process of being an apprentice at that library, the library is attacked, the headmistress is killed, and she has to go on this adventure to save the rest of the libraries and essentially save her kingdom. So it was really good. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was like heavy in places, but like also kind of a cozy fantasy where it had dark moments, but mostly it just felt good. I think because of the books, honestly. Like, just because of the magic system, it just felt cozy and nice and happy and good, and it gave me all the warm fuzzies, so I really enjoyed it. After that one, I decided to go ahead and read Heartstopper Volume 2, which I also gave 5 stars and absolutely loved. I was starting to feel myself get into kind of a reading slump, and so I hoped that this would pull me out of one, and honestly, it did a good job. After that, I was just looking through one of the library apps that I use, and I found Saint by Adrienne Young, and I read the description, and it just sounded really interesting. Saint is about this merchant who lives in this magical world where there are people who can they have like a magic where they can like sense gems, and gem trading is really big in their world. And Saint is a merchant who ends up stowing away on his ship this girl who turns out to be a gem sage, and it's a romance between those two. There's a lot more that happens. It's actually a prequel to Fable and Namesake. I didn't know that at the time. I just saw it and read the description, and it looked good, so I read it. I am kind of sad that I did it that way because I loved Saint a lot more than I liked Fable and Namesake. Those are the next 2 books that I read. Fable is essentially about Saint and Isolde's daughter. What also is funny is in Fable and Namesake, the narrator pronounced her name Isolde, but in Saint, they pronounced it Isolde, I'm pretty sure. So, interesting that they were pronounced differently. So Saint ends up leaving his daughter on an island, a small island. It is like populated, but it is rather small, after her mom dies, and when she's like 14, and is essentially like, this life isn't safe for you, you need to stay here. And she's like, no, I don't want to stay here. And he's like, great, well, if you get off this island and come find me, then I'll give you your inheritance. And so she spends the book getting off the island and finding her father. And there's other things that happen, but at the end of the day, I gave Fable and Namesake 3 stars. They were okay, they were a fun time, but I liked Saint a lot better. I gave Saint 4 stars. So those were all by Adrienne Young, in case I didn't say. And then there are only 2 more books that I read this month. That is Keeping the Moon by Sarah Dessen. I'm doing a series over on TikTok where I read Sarah Dessen books and review them. She was my favorite author when I was in high school and like the end of junior high. And yeah, I really enjoyed her. So I just thought it would be really fun to read her books again and see what I think of them now. I started with Keeping the Moon for no real reason. I've been thrifting the books, and I have 4 now, but I just picked Keeping the Moon. I think it might have been my favorite, but I honestly don't remember for sure. I gave it 2 stars, so it was kind of a fun time. It's about Coley, who is 15, And for the summer, she gets sent off to stay with her aunt in one of the Carolinas in a beach town. And her mom is a fitness influencer who, well, back in the 90s, so she was a fitness like guru who was doing like a European tour, and so Coley had to go stay with her aunt. And it's kind of a story about Coley really coming into herself after being bullied really badly in school. Before because she was fat, and then after she lost the weight, she was called a slut, and it was just like really hard and sad for her. I gave this book such a low rating because it was kind of boring, and honestly that's probably just because I'm an adult and I'm not the intended audience for this book anymore, but I just found myself like my eyes glazing over a couple times. And then also I didn't love the way that the book handled Coley and her mom having been fat and then losing the weight. Again, the book was written in 1999, and while that's not an excuse for how it was handled, it just, at the end of the day, it didn't, I thought that where she was going with it was like that the weight didn't matter, and she kind of got there, but at what cost? You know, just the way that weight was talked about in the beginning of the book, it just really rubbed me the wrong way, and it didn't feel impactful enough to really be necessary. So, Cubing the Moon by Sarah Dessen. You will be hearing more Sarah Dessen book reviews coming soon. Lastly, I read Just the Nicest Couple by Mary Kubica or Kubica. I thought it was Kubica, but at the beginning of the audiobook it sounded like the narrator said Kubica, and I would imagine her name would be pronounced correctly at the beginning of her own audiobook. So anyways, this book is about a man who goes missing and the couple who covered up his murder. And it's twisty. There's a lot going on. A lot of unexpected things happening. I did really enjoy the ending, for the most part. Yeah. I don't really know how to explain it really without giving a bunch away, but it's good. I've always really liked Mary Kubica books, so I wasn't really surprised that I liked it, but I really did. I gave it 4 stars. I gave it 4 stars. But yeah, that was all the books that I read this month. 17, but we only talked about 16 of them. And I am very excited. I've already finished a couple of books this month, and it's only the 5th, so we're doing great. But thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. I'm working really hard on growing my social media following. I've been working really hard on TikTok, but I'm going to start focusing some of my energy here on YouTube as well. So comment down below any specific videos that you would like to see. I have a vlog that I'm going to be posting in a couple of days. I just need to film the wrap-up video for that. I actually filmed like all of the clips back in February and just never got around to posting them. So yeah, that is where we're at. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.